Hey class, welcome to week 9. As you'll see here in a minute, week 9, the kind of theme for this week is going to be on reflection. And so what I want to do in this video is to kind of introduce you to this idea of metacognition that we've been toying with in all of your process memos, that we've been toying with in some of the feedback that you've been getting, right? This idea that you're starting to be able to think about your own thinking, think about your own thought processes, think about your writing to kind of monitor what it is that you're doing in order to make different choices, make better choices, reflect on your choices, reflect on your writing, all of these ideas that really kind of coalesce around that learning outcome of reflection. Now, the reason that we're doing reflection this week is because we're off to the races with your Project 3. You're still working on your Project 3B, which, as you remember, I've pushed back to November 4th is the final date for that. And so really, we're at a good point here where we've got a lot of kind of ground under our feet that we can kind of stop and pause and think about what it is that we're doing, what we've done so far, and also it being kind of close to the halfway point of the semester. It's a good way to think about, okay, I've come this far, what can I do from here on out to either continue doing what you're doing or to improve what you're doing or whatever it is that might be. So before we get to the reflection part of this discussion, I want to take a look at what's on deck for this week. So as you'll notice, in terms of reading and work, it's relatively light. What I mean by that is there's no real new reading, there's no real new work to be doing other than the work that you're already doing. And so your goal for this week is to continue to think about and hopefully complete your Project 3B, but again, it's not due till November 4th. To continue to do research and to draft your literature review. Now that you have your introduction done, you should be in a good place to sit down and start to pull all these things together. And then finally to do our assignments, the blog 6 and the midterm reflection. Now let me take a minute to talk about that 3B again. Now I know I spoke about this a little bit last week, but I also want to return to it again. What I want to stress to you guys is that Project 3B is not meant to be anything stressful. It's supposed to be a way for you, I'm going to pull up that example I looked at here. It's a way for you to get used to talking to people outside of the community. It's a way to kind of practice taking the research and the expertise that you have and communicating that in a way that is more accessible to a larger audience. So there's two reasons that we're doing this kind of visual representation. One is to get practice in synthesizing your work, to practice kind of bringing a couple sources in, practice talking about why you're interested in what you're interested in. The other one is because this kind of visual representation is really accessible to people outside of the community. And so what it asks you to do is it asks you to translate some of the knowledge that you've gained into something that is understandable to people outside of that community. So it's good practice not only doing this kind of multimodal presentation, which many of your communities will value, and many of you will have to do things like this, presentations like this in your careers, but it's also a good way to think about, okay, so I'm not talking to, I'm not talking in that same kind of register that I would be talking in say a research paper. And so what changes here? Well, what you're communicating, how you're communicating, all that's going to change. So it's good practice making those changes. And so again, just looking at the example from last week, we can see really all we're doing is we're talking the audience through why you're interested in this topic, what your personal stake is. Basically, you're working through the same kind of steps that you did in your introduction already. So your personal stake, your research question, right? And then you're just going to start talking us through a couple of the sources that you found, right? And so you're asking questions, you're showing your audience, these are the questions that I'm working through. And then you're just giving us some discussion of these sources. Now you'll notice down here these little audio things. That's because this person has, and this is what you'll be doing as well, has done the kind of voice record over each of the slides. And so not only are you using these things or these slides to kind of convey information, but when you're doing that recording, you can talk to us and kind of flesh these ideas out. Now again, I want to stress that this is very much a conversation. This shouldn't feel like some sort of completed research project presentation. This is just you talking us through what you found so far. Very much like what it would be like if you and I sat down in person. I said, okay, so what have you found so far? Why are you interested in this topic? And tell me what these sources are talking about. So it's just that kind of conversational tone that we're looking for. Okay. So again, I recommend you getting this completed sooner rather than later because of all those good kind of moments of practice that this offers you. But also because what you'll see is doing this will help you think more carefully about actually completing the literature review, because you'll have that practice of synthesizing sources. And so doing it sooner, kind of way out in advance of a draft of Project 3A will help you write a better 3A. So go ahead and upload that to your peer review groups, which you now have boards up there for. Okay, so that's Project 3B. Now, if you still have questions about that, I do want to stress that I am available, so please email me. We could Skype. We could meet in person if you wanted to. So I am accessible to you guys. I'm here. I'm waiting for your emails, your questions. It's never a bother. I know some of you keep saying sorry to bother you. It's literally never a bother. This is my job. This is what I love to do, and so I'm here for you guys. Okay, so let's talk about the rest of week 9 then. So our goal then, as you continue to work on Project 3A and 3B, is to start to think about what you've done so far. Now, the reason that we are so interested in reflection in this course and in kind of writing studies in general is because it's those moments of reflection that really allow you to grow. This is where you can stop and evaluate what you've done, how far you've come, what you want to do. And it's in these moments that you can really stop and think about what it is you want to be in your writing, how you want your writing to represent you, right? How you want the choices that you've made to reflect you moving forward. So in other words, if you've really struggled with some things in previous assignments, what are those things and how can we change them? Instead of just going through with the same old thing, we can sit down and think about how to make better choices. Or if you've done really well, you can think about, okay, so what's one thing that's still challenging me? Let me see if I can work a way around that. And so that's what Blog 6 and the midterm reflection are going to ask you to do. And so as you'll notice, since I pushed back, if some of you looked at this already, since I pushed back the due date for 3B, I've also altered the blog a bit. And so rather than focus on kind of a Q&A from your presentation, it'll be focused on kind of a Q&A-ish discussion of some feedback that you've received so far. So let's take a look. So Blog 6 is basically just asking you to think about a couple different things, or one of two different things. So for this blog post, select any comments or feedback you've received so far that have helped you develop your writing. So that could be feedbacks from your group members, feedbacks from me, if you went to the Writing Center, feedback from a tutor, whatever it is. Any feedback. What kind of things are you working on? And so in other words, so what was that piece of feedback? And then what did it help you improve? And then what have you learned just generally about your community through these processes? So again, we're kind of shifting focus here from the kind of minute discussion of one particular piece of feedback, how that's helped you develop your writing, and then just moving towards, okay, so now in general, what are you learning about your community? Or this is your other question, if you're working on or if you've completed Project 3B, this is another option. Discuss how Project 3B is helping you think about your research. How does, there should be space there. How does presenting your research in this way affect your understanding of sources, topics, etc.? So in other words, what have you gotten out of doing Project 3B? How has it helped you think about that kind of synthesis between sources, or how has it helped you understand your sources, or what has it done for you? So those are your two options. Either talk about one piece of feedback that you've received, or talk about how 3B is helping you think about your research so far. Okay, so let's take a look at the midterm reflection. Now this is another thing that I like to do in this class because it is a good opportunity not only to stop and think about how far you've come, but it's also good practice for what will be your final project in this class, which is a kind of final reflective letter. But we'll get to that later. So for this assignment, I want you to compose a 500 to 1,000 word reflection in which you assess your performance in this course, providing evidence for successes and describing goals and plans for continuing to work on areas of the class which you feel you need to give more attention. So in other words, I'm asking you to be honest with yourselves and think about how you're doing. how you've done so far, what you're happy with, and to use examples from your work, so references to the essays, to the blogs, peer review, whatever you've done, but references to real things that you've produced in this class as evidence. So in other words, if you say like, look, one of the things that I've done really well on in this course is I've really developed my ability to incorporate sources fluidly or effectively, or I've done a really good job of analyzing research instead of just using quotes randomly. And so once you say that, I want you to bring in or discuss an example of that. Like, so you could say, like, for example, in Project 2, when I was doing the genre analysis, instead of just saying author A said this, author B said this, author A, author B, back and forth, I did X, Y, and Z, whatever it is you did. So again, bring in real evidence from your text to help kind of flesh these discussions out. And then I want you to kind of describe your goals for the rest of the semester. What are some things that you want to continue to work on? What are some skills that you want to continue to develop, or whatever that might be? And if you do get stuck, I've given you some guiding questions. So what have you done in this class that you're most proud of? What are some challenges that you've run into? What are some skills that you've worked on this semester, and what would you like to work on moving forward? So again, both of these things are just aimed at helping you think about your own writing, to think about your own work, to think about your own practices, whatever it is, and so that we can be conscious of the choices that we make when we're doing the work. The things that you do in your research, in your writing, in your work, all of these things, they don't just happen randomly. They're a product of choices that you make. And so by becoming aware of those choices, we can be more efficient in what we do. We can make different choices, better choices, more rhetorically, situationally appropriate choices, whatever it is. And so this is a really good moment to develop a skill that's going to pay dividends for you later on. Because a lot of people don't really have this ability to stop and to think and to evaluate themselves honestly. And if you can do that, then that is one of those skills that will translate really effectively outside of English and outside of college. So when you get into the workforce, it's not just I'm going to sit down and do my work from A to B and that's it. But if you can sit down and to think about, okay, why did I just do that? Or what could I have done differently? That is a skill that is, that a lot of people do not have and that many employers and many workplaces really value. So this is a good opportunity to practice that. Okay, so just to recap, continue to work on 3A and 3B. Remember, 3B is due November 4th. In the meantime, continue to do your research, continue to flesh out your literature review. If you still are confused, then go back to that sample I put up in the literature review, or go up to the video in which I walked you through the literature review, or email me, and we can figure it out. And so then by Sunday, go ahead and finish or turn in your blog 6, that feedback and reflection, and complete your midterm reflection. All right, guys, thank you. I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions, and I will talk to you later.